I was working the night shift at a small hotel in Copenhagen when an American family rolled in around 11 p.m. They weren't just checking in, they were announcing it. The dad's voice bounced off every surface in our lobby. He was explaining their flight delays to me, to the other guests reading in the lounge area, basically to anyone within a 100-meter radius. His wife laughed at something on her phone, that full-throated laugh that could wake the dead. Their teenage son was FaceTiming someone back home, speaker on full blast. The elderly Danish couple near the fireplace looked up from their books, not angry, just startled, like someone had set off a car alarm in a library. I smiled politely and handed over the room keys, keeping my voice at what we'd consider normal volume, which probably sounded like whispering to them. The dad looked confused when I didn't match his energy. "Something wrong?" he asked, even louder. I shook my head. Nothing wrong yet, I thought. Give it 20 minutes. That prediction held up. At 11:30 p.m., my phone lit up with the first noise complaint. Room 301. The American family was directly above them. I could hear them myself now. Footsteps like thunder, voices carrying through the walls. They weren't fighting or partying, just existing at their normal volume, which in Denmark, especially after 10 p.m., might as well be a rock concert. When I knocked on their door, the dad answered, still talking at full volume. "Hey, everything okay?" I explained gently that other guests were trying to sleep. He looked genuinely shocked. "We're just talking," he said, which was true. They were just talking, in a voice that could reach the back row of a theater. I noticed his family behind him, having a full conversation while I stood there. Nobody whispering, nobody even trying to be quiet. Just normal American living room volume, in a Danish hotel, at midnight. But that was just the beginning of what I'd learned about volume differences that summer. 2 weeks later, I was having dinner at a cafe in the Latin Quarter when 4 American college students sat at the next table. Within seconds, everyone knew they were American, not because of their clothes or their accents, because you could hear their entire conversation from across the street. They were discussing their Tinder matches, their hostel drama, their opinions on European beer. The French diners around them got quieter, as if trying to balance out the noise, like the universe needed equilibrium. The Americans didn't notice. They kept going, voices climbing, laughter exploding, completely unaware they'd become the entertainment. The waiter approached their table with his order pad, face perfectly neutral. In France, they've mastered the art of polite disapproval. He took their order in near-whisper French. They responded in voices that could reach the Eiffel Tower. When he walked away, I saw him share a look with another waiter. No words needed, just that universal expression of, "Here we go again." I started noticing it everywhere after that. Americans on metros, in museums, at parks, always operating at what seemed like 75%, more volume than everyone around them. Not trying to be rude, just being themselves, which happened to be loud. I was working as a tour guide in Stockholm when I witnessed what I now call the museum incident. Woman in her 60s from Texas, joined my group for a visit to the Vasa Museum. Beautiful place. A 17th century warship preserved in near darkness to protect the wood. The museum specifically asks for quiet voices. There are signs everywhere. We walked in, and I started explaining the ship's history in my practiced museum voice. Soft, clear, just loud enough. The Texas woman interrupted with a question. Except it wasn't really a question. It was a proclamation. "How'd they get that whole ship in here?" Her voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The ship itself seemed to shudder. 40 Swedish visitors turned to stare. Not obviously. Swedes don't do obvious, but I felt the collective shift in attention. I answered her quietly, hoping she'd match my volume. She didn't. "That's incredible! Jerry, look at the size of it!" Jerry, her husband, nodded silently. He'd learned something in his decades of marriage. A museum guard approached. In Sweden, they're polite to a fault. "Madam, we ask guests to use quiet voices. The preservation, you understand?" He barely spoke above a whisper. She looked confused. "I am being quiet," she said, at a volume that would be appropriate for calling someone across a parking lot. The guard's eye twitched, just slightly. I saw it happen. For the next 40 minutes, every observation she made reached every corner of that museum. The wood looks so old. "Yes, it's from 1628. Why'd it sink?" I literally just explained that. "Jerry, take my picture." Jerry did quickly, probably hoping speed would reduce the noise somehow. When we left, she tipped me generously and said I was the best guide she'd had in Europe. I appreciated it, but I also appreciated the silence that filled the museum after she left. 3 months later, I was serving tables at a restaurant in Prague. Lunch rush. Mostly locals and some German tourists. Then a group of 5 American businessmen walked in. They'd been at some conference. You could tell because they were still in conference mode. Conference voice, which meant talking, like they needed to reach the projector at the back of a hotel. Ballroom. They sat down and immediately started a conversation about market trends. The entire restaurant heard their quarterly projections. The Czech couple next to them leaned away, like the sound had physical force. An older woman 2 tables over put down her fork and just stared. I took their orders in Czech accented English, speaking quietly. They responded at full volume. One guy actually asked me to speak up. I was standing 2 feet from him. In what world did I need to be louder? But I repeated myself, adding maybe 10% more volume. He nodded, satisfied. Their conversation continued through appetizers, main courses, dessert. They talked about their hotels, their flights, their opinions on European business culture. Everyone in the restaurant became an unwilling participant in their meeting. When they paid and left, the Czech couple actually thanked me. "Finally," the woman said, "we can hear ourselves think." I was working at a pharmacy in Amsterdam when an American student came in looking for cold medicine. She was maybe 20, backpack covered in pins, clearly studying abroad. She approached the counter and started explaining her symptoms. In detail. Loud detail. "So I've had this cough for 3 days." The other customers in line shifted uncomfortably. In the Netherlands, people don't broadcast their medical issues. And my nose is super stuffed up. More detail than anyone needed. Also, I think I have a fever. But I don't know because you guys use Celsius and I have no idea what that means. My colleague, a Dutch woman who'd worked there for 20 years, kept her voice low and professional. "Let me recommend something." She pulled out a box of decongestants. The student took it, read the instructions, and announced to everyone within 50 meters. "This says to take it every 6 hours. That seems like a lot." An elderly Dutchman behind her in line cleared his throat. She didn't take the hint. She kept going, asking about side effects, about whether she could drink alcohol with it, about whether it would make her drowsy for her classes. All at top volume, my colleague answered each question quietly, calmly, probably hoping it would be contagious. It wasn't. The student paid. Still talking, still projecting. When she left, the elderly man stepped up to the counter. "Americans," he said simply. My colleague just smiled. What else could she do? I was working as a ticket agent at a train station in Florence when a young couple from California came to book seats to Venice. It was 7 a.m. The station was full of sleepy Italians clutching coffee, trying to start their day peacefully. The couple was wide awake and fully operational. "We want to go to Venice," the girlfriend announced, like she was ordering at a drive-thru. I explained the available trains, speaking normally. She turned to her boyfriend. "Babe, should we get the 9:15 or the 10:30? He considered this question at equal volume. "What do you think? When do we need to check out?" Their entire travel planning session happened right there at my window, at full volume, in English. The Italian woman behind them in line checked her watch, then checked it again. A subtle Italian sigh. I processed their tickets as quickly as possible, hoping to end the acoustic assault. But as they walked away, the girlfriend had another thought. She came back. Sorry. One more question. The Italian woman's sigh became less subtle. Do we need to validate these? I explained the validation process quietly. She thanked me loudly, then validated her ticket at the machine, narrating each step to her boyfriend across the station. Okay, so you put it in here, then it stamps it. That's so cool! The Italian woman finally reached my window. She didn't say anything about the Americans. Didn't need to. We both knew I was working the reception desk at a hostel in Krakow when 3 American gap-year travelers checked in around 2 a.m. They'd just come from a bar. They weren't drunk, just happy and loud. Very, very loud. The hostel had maybe 50 people sleeping in dorm rooms. The walls were thin. This was common knowledge, posted on signs. Mentioned during check-in, the Americans nodded along as I explained the quiet hours policy. Totally, one of them said at regular speaking volume, which at 2 a.m. might as well have been shouting, "We'll be super quiet." They headed to their room. I heard them the entire way down the hallway. This place is so cool. Dude, where's your bed? I'm starving. Did we get food? Every person in every room along that corridor woke up. I know because I got 5 messages on the hostel phone within 10 minutes. I walked to their dorm. 8 bunks, 16 beds, 13 occupied. 3 people had given up on sleep and were on their phones, glaring. The Americans were unpacking, having a full conversation about their day. Nobody had whispered a single word. I knocked and used my serious hostel voice. Guys, people are sleeping. You need to whisper. They looked genuinely surprised. We are whispering, one said. At a volume appropriate for a noisy restaurant, I demonstrated actual whispering. They tried to copy it. Their version was what most people would call talking quietly. Close, but not quite. For the next hour, I heard them trying. Is this quiet enough? One stage whispered, which was somehow louder than just talking. Someone in another room yelled, "Shut up!" in Polish. That finally did it. They went silent for about 15 minutes. Then I heard snoring that could wake the neighboring hostels. I was working at a library in Oslo when an American professor came in for research. He was maybe 50, tweed jacket, looked exactly like you'd picture an academic. He sat at a table in the reading room, pulled out his laptop, and started working. Then his phone rang. He answered it. In the library, at full volume. Hey, yeah, I'm in Oslo, at the university. Library. 40 Norwegian students looked up from their books in perfect synchronization, like a choreographed dance of disapproval. The tidy professor continued his conversation, completely oblivious. The weather's been pretty good. Cold, though. A Norwegian student walked over and politely pointed to the "no phone calls" sign. The professor held up one finger, the universal sign for 1 minute. That minute turned into 5. So the conference. Paper is coming along. More students gathered their things and moved to all-too-relatable. Different floors. The reading room was emptying out like he'd released a toxic gas. When he finally hung up, he went back to his work, totally unaware he'd just caused a small migration. 20 minutes later, his phone rang again. He answered it again. Hello? Yeah, I can talk. The remaining students gave up. The room cleared completely. I was shelving books nearby and watched the whole thing. When he finally left 3 hours later, students slowly returned, like animals after a predator leaves the watering hole. I was working as a conductor on a regional train in Switzerland when an American family boarded in Zurich. Parents, 2 young kids, grandma. They were excited about the Alps. The entire train knew this because they discussed it at length. At volume. Swiss trains are quiet. It's an unspoken rule. People read, work on laptops, sleep. Conversations happen at library volume. The Swiss take their train silence seriously. It's practically a national value. The American family didn't get the memo. The kids were maybe 7 and 9, and they had questions. Loud questions. Mom, why are the mountains so big? Dad, can we go skiing? Grandma, are you hungry? Each question echoed through the car. The parents answered with equal enthusiasm. Isn't this beautiful? Look at that village. Honey, take a picture. An elderly Swiss man across the aisle closed his eyes. Not to sleep, to endure. I checked their tickets and gently mentioned that Swiss trains are typically quiet. The dad nodded. Oh, sure, totally. Then immediately returned to his conversation. So, anyway, the hotel is supposed to have great views. Volume unchanged. A Swiss woman got up and moved to a different car. Then another person. Then 3 more. The Americans noticed the exodus and seemed confused. Why's everyone leaving? The mom asked. The irony was completely lost on them. By the time we reached Lucerne, their car was nearly empty. They chatted the entire journey, never dropping below what most cultures would consider outdoor voice. When they got off, I saw passengers from other cars immediately claim the newly available seats. The quiet returned like a tide coming back. I was working at a spa in Reykjavik when an American couple came for the full thermal experience. Iceland is serious about its spa culture. It's meditative, peaceful, almost sacred. People whisper if they talk at all. The couple arrived, checked in, and headed to the main pool. I was manning the desk, but could hear them clearly from inside the building. The woman had thoughts about everything. This water is so warm. Honey, look at the steam! I should post this on Instagram. Other guests, mostly Icelandic and European, maintained their silence, created a bubble of quiet around themselves. The Americans filled every available space with sound. The man called out to his wife from across the pool. Not a gentle call, a full shout. Babe, try the hot tub, she shouted back. Is it hotter than this? He confirmed loudly that yes, the hot tub was indeed hotter. An Icelandic woman who worked there longer than I had been alive approached them. She had the voice of someone who'd witnessed the northern lights bring her messages. Soft, calm, weighted. We asked guests to enjoy the quiet, she said. The couple apologized. Sincerely. They really weren't trying to be disruptive. They lowered their voices for approximately 10 minutes. Then the woman saw a cool rock formation. Oh my God, look at that! And they were back to full volume. The Icelandic woman looked at me. I looked back. Some battles can't be won. I was working as a language exchange partner in Barcelona when I met Emma, a college student from Michigan spending a semester abroad. We met at a cafe for her first session. She was nervous, talking fast and loud. I'm so excited to improve my Spanish. I keep messing up the verbs. The Spanish couple at the next table glanced over. I suggested we keep our voices down a bit. Emma looked around, confused. Why? The cafe's pretty empty. It had maybe 15 people. To her, that was empty. To Spaniards, that was plenty of ears. We practiced basic conversations. She'd repeat phrases after me, always at about 30% more volume than necessary. ¿Dónde está el baño? Perfect pronunciation. Excessive volume. An old man reading a newspaper lowered it and watched us with interest. Free entertainment. Halfway through our session, something clicked. Emma noticed the ambient noise level. Actually noticed it for the first time. Wait, she said, finally speaking quietly. Everyone here is really quiet. I nodded. Most places in Europe are. She looked genuinely stunned. I thought cafes were supposed to be noisy. For the rest of our session, she made an effort to match the volume around her. It was clearly hard work. Like her natural setting was stuck at 7, and she had to manually hold it at 4. But she tried. By the end, she was almost whispering. Is this too quiet now? She asked. The Spanish couple smiled. Progress. I was working at a movie theater in Dublin when a group of 8 American tourists came for a screening. They arrived 15 minutes early, chatting in the lobby. You could hear them from every corner. They were friends from college, reuniting for a European trip. Their excitement was genuine and aggressive. They took their seats in the half-full theater, still talking. The previews started. They kept talking, not about the previews, about their trip. Did you try the fish and chips? The Guinness here is so much better. We should go to that pub. After. The Irish patrons around them did the very Irish thing of suffering in disapproving silence. One man tried clearing his throat. The Americans didn't. Notice, a woman 2 rows ahead turned around and gave them a look. They missed it entirely. The actual movie started. They finally went quiet for about 5 minutes. Then one of them had a comment about the plot, her friend responded. Another friend laughed. Soon enough, half of them were providing live commentary. An Irish man in front of them turned around. "Would you mind?" he said, painfully polite. They apologized and went quiet again. This cycle repeated 4 times throughout the movie. Talk. Get shushed. Apologize. Go quiet. Start talking again. Like they'd forgotten the lesson every 15 minutes. After the movie, I heard one of them say, "Why was everyone so serious in there?" Her friend agreed. It's just a movie. People need to relax. They genuinely didn't understand that movie theaters elsewhere operate at a different social standard than American ones, where commentary is more accepted. I was working night security at an apartment building in Vienna when new tenants moved into 4B American couple, mid-30s, relocated for work. Nice people, respectful, but loud. Their first night, they had some friends over, just 4 people total, but it sounded like a party of 20. Their laughter echoed down the stairwell. Their conversations leaked through walls. At 11 p.m., I got the first complaint call. The Austrian tenant in 4A. "It sounds like they're in my apartment," she said. I knocked on their door. They answered, music playing in the background, surprised to see me. "Everything okay?" the husband asked. I explained the complaint. They were shocked. "We're just having dinner," the wife said, which was true. But dinner at a volume that in Vienna qualifies as a disturbance. They turned down the music and promised to be quieter. They really tried, but hear the difference. But quieter, for them still registered as loud for the building. The 4A tenant called again at midnight. "They're still going," she said, exhausted. This pattern continued for 3 weeks. They'd have normal evenings at American volume. Neighbors would complain. They'd adjust, still too loud. More complaints. They started to understand that their baseline, normal was everyone else's, unacceptable. The husband stopped me in the lobby one morning. "I had no idea we were considered loud people," he said. "Back home, we're actually pretty quiet." I believed him. But pretty quiet in American suburbs might still be unacceptably loud in a Viennese apartment building. Different worlds, different standards. I was working as a park ranger in the Swiss Alps when I encountered a family from Arizona doing a nature hike. The mountains were pristine, quiet, except for bird calls and wind through the trees. That peaceful alpine silence that people travel continents to. Experience the family. Appreciated the beauty. They said so. Repeatedly. Full volume. "This is gorgeous. Kids, look at that peak." Everybody smile for a picture. Their voices bounced off the mountains and came back to us. Other hikers, mostly European, gave them space. Lots of space. The family didn't notice. They were too busy narrating their entire hike. I'm getting tired. How much further? Did anyone bring water? Each statement, a proclamation. We reached a scenic overlook where about 20 people had gathered to enjoy the view in silence. Cameras out, whispers only. The Arizona family arrived. Wow! Look at this. The silent crowd suddenly wasn't silent anymore. because the Americans had imported sound into the stillness. The father noticed the quiet crowd and seemed to realize something. He lowered his voice. "Oh, should we be quieter?" he asked his wife, still loud enough to reach everyone. She looked around and nodded. They spent the next 10 minutes actually whispering. It clearly took effort. The kids kept forgetting and had to be shushed. When we hiked back down, the father stopped me. "Do we Americans always seem loud to you?" I chose my words carefully. "Different cultures have different comfortable volumes." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm starting to notice that." Self-awareness. Finally arriving, I was working at a late-night convenience store in Copenhagen, my last shift before moving back to Denmark's countryside, when a woman from Texas came in around 1 a.m. She was maybe 45, traveling solo, wearing a "Don't Mess with Texas" shirt. She grabbed some snacks and came to the counter. "Y'all have the weirdest chips here," she said, placing 5 bags on the counter. The tea store was silent except for the hum of refrigerators. 2 Danish university students studying in the corner looked up from their laptops. "Back home, we don't have these flavors." I scanned her items quietly, hoping she'd take the hint. She didn't. She was on a roll. "I've been here 3 days, and I love it. But everyone's so quiet. Like, all the time, even at restaurants." The students exchanged glances. One smiled slightly. "Free show at 1 a.m. I told her the total in my normal Danish volume, which to her probably sounded like a whisper. "What?" she asked. I repeated it, slightly louder. She paid and started telling me about her trip. Full volume. The story involved a museum, a misunderstanding with a tour guide, and her opinions on Danish pastries. The students had completely given up on studying now. They were just watching this unfold. Then something shifted in her face. Real awareness. She looked around the silent store, at the quiet students, at me with my customer service smile. "Oh my God," she said, and this time she actually lowered her voice. "I'm being really loud right now, aren't I?" I could have lied, been polite, but she'd asked directly. "A bit louder than typical," I admitted. She put her hand over her mouth, genuinely embarrassed. "I do this everywhere, don't I? My daughter keeps telling me I talk too loud." The students nodded in the background, unable to help themselves. She laughed. Quieter this time. "Well, this is mortifying." She grabbed her chips and walked toward the door, then turned back. "Hey, I'm gonna work on this. Thank you for being honest." She left, and the store returned to its natural quiet state. The students went back to their books. The refrigerators hummed. One of the students came to buy coffee 20 minutes later. "Does that happen often?" he asked. I nodded. "More than you'd think." He smiled. At least she figured it out. Eventually. That's the thing about Americans and volume. Most aren't trying to be disruptive. They're just being themselves, at their natural frequency. And that frequency, in most of Europe and beyond, registers as way too high. Some figure it out quickly. Some take longer. Some never quite get there, continuing through their European adventures at full blast. Genuinely confused why everyone seems so serious. And these stories? They never stop coming. Every shift brings someone new, someone loud, someone experiencing that moment of realization that their normal is someone else's excessive. Sometimes they adjust, sometimes they don't, but they always make the quiet places a little less quiet, even if just for a moment.